That brings us to our discussion agenda. Proposed revisions of the strategic plan include the mandated Read to Succeed goals shown in Exhibit C.
Mr. Chair, board members, recently we were advised that Read to Succeed, which is a law, they have some goals, need to be incorporated in our district strategic plan and school renewal plan. And so we wanted to give you some context about that because it's significantly different from the strategic planning process we just underwent. So I'll just talk you through kind of how this happened and where we are. As you can see, the requirement for a district strategic plan and school renewal plans is based in law. So it requires that we have those and that we update them annually, and we have a complete revision once every 5 years. Just to remind you of some things that have happened over the last few years, both the district strategic plan and the advanced ed review were scheduled for 2015. But as we looked at that, we determined that that really didn't serve the district very well. So we requested a 1-year delay, which would align the district strategic planning process with advanced ed. In that way, we could take the results of the advanced ed process and use them to inform our district strategic plan. Again, you recall that we had a very successful advanced ed reaccreditation process, which ended in 2015. And in February 2016, the State Department of Education provided guidance that we needed to have these Read to Succeed goals in our district strategic plan and the school renewal plans. The districts and schools were already really far along in the process. I mean, we had started almost a year earlier with committees and working groups to try to hammer out a really good district strategic plan, and we handed that plan off to the schools, and they began to work on their school renewal plan. And this last-minute change we felt really was not in the best interest of our schools or the district. And so we continued on with that district strategic planning process as it was, and submitted those goals in April of 2016. And so we have, as of today, we have a brand new updated strategic plan, and all our school renewal plans are up to date and filed at the Department of Education. But at the same time we were closing in on that, we began to work on these brand new requirement for Read to Succeed goals. And we needed to create a reading plan, which was now going to be incorporated into the district strategic plan. So we did it basically in a phased operation. So here were our 5 goals in the original district strategic plan, which is now on file. We talk about world-class knowledge, we talk about productive citizens, safe, supporting, and nurturing environment, highly effective, diverse staff, and maximizing school and district resources. And so you can see they're very global, and in each one of those we had action steps under those which kind of framed the work that we did. So we thought we were done. We had a great strategic plan, we had good school renewal plans, and then the Department of Education did this. And that's a picture of what our one page looks like. The Read to Succeed Act was passed, and it said that we needed to present specific information and data in the format specified by the Read to Succeed office. So that's what the legislation said. And then the Department of Education Read to Succeed office said reading plans will be submitted to SDE in spring, that's this year, in the regular district strategic plans. And so now we had to go back into our strategic plans and add the new Read to Succeed goals. They further specified that there'd be 7 goals in the Read to Succeed plan. So these new goals, so now what you've got is a district strategic plan that 7 new Read to Succeed goals are going to be added to, and they're in your packet. The first is element 1, which is focusing on leadership in reading. The second is focusing on student outcomes in our reading program. The third, professional learning opportunities. The fourth, the assessment plan. The fifth, our instructional plan. The sixth element talks about parent and family involvement. The 7th and final goal is school community partnerships. So these are the 7 new goals that are being incorporated into our district strategic plan. It does create a little bit of an imbalance for us as we have these 7 reading goals juxtaposed to the 5 goals we already had. But I must say, I think we did a tremendous job finishing our district strategic plan, and then the instruction office under the leadership of Dr. Melton and Mr. Giuliano really focused on how we could make these new 7 goals the very best that they could be for our district. So here's where we are right now. We're updating the recently submitted district strategic plan with these new Read to Succeed goals, and they need to be in by June 1st. We'll bring them back to you for final reading at our next meeting on May 23rd. The schools are creating their own reading plans now based on the district plan. And the schools will add their new Read to Succeed goals to their school renewal plan no later than September 1st. And then we kind of get back on the normal schedule. All the district strategic plans, including these new goals, will be reviewed annually, and we make minor updates. And then we'll return to our normal 5-year schedule with advanced ed, the district strategic plan, and school renewal plans, including these new Read to Succeed goals. So we just wanted you to know that this, we know the board, we just took all these goals to you a few months ago. We had you approve our 5 goals. We thought they were excellent, but we had no idea at the time that that was going on that we would have this new requirement to add the Read to Succeed goals. However, we did a great job, as we did with the initial goals, of bringing community partners, having conferences, really looking at these goals so that they could be meaningful for our teachers and for our students. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain them. If there are specific questions about the technical part of the plan, Dr. Melton might need to help me.
Ms. Hutchinson.
I have a question about the, under next steps, number 2, schools will create their reading plan. I'm wondering why we wouldn't do that in maybe collaboration, have representatives from each schools at the various levels, and come up with reading plans that are appropriate for each level. That way, with all those minds working together, then I would think they would come up with the very best idea. My preference is that every school in the district would have the best possible plan, and I do believe that that happens when people brainstorm and work together.
I'll start, and then Dr. Mel. I mean, the district strategic plan provides an umbrella, and so all the plans that they would create have to be nested inside of that. So there might be some minor differences based on the specific school needs, but I think overall they're going to be very similar, and then I'll just leave it to Dr. Melton if she has something to add.
The collaborative effort was very strong and purposeful. As Mr. Bounds said, we continued to find out more information as this process unfolded, and our fear was if we had the schools follow the district, did this hand in hand, that we may be wasting time because the rules were being written as we were in the game, which made things unfortunate for us to decide how to make this look towards the end. So instead what we did is we looked for leaders at different levels, ranging from elementary schools, intermediate, middle schools, and high schools, in addition to coordinators and people from my department. We met each month over the course throughout the school year, and it seems every time we met there was a new update where something had changed. So we as a committee came up with the idea, let's do this work to get started to create the foundation, and then the schools would follow the lead and add more personal things to their particular plan to make sure that theirs was data-driven, just like our district plan was. As we look to our school needs, they're going to vary just a little bit depending on the needs of those students that they're serving, as where we're looking at things holistically. We're looking at subgroups, which are individual groups of students that are performing. We're looking at overall averages. So it allowed the schools a better opportunity to dig deeper into their data as opposed to getting caught in the system data. Our hope was that we could make sure that we led the way with a clear focus, and then they add their particular needs at the school level in addition to this. But this is a foundation they could add to, but not take away from. In addition to that, in addition to the committees that were meeting, we made sure that principals heard updates from those that were representing them. So whenever the principals came together, their representative updated them to gauge ideas from them to be sure that they were actually being spokespersons for their group, not just simply being the person that made the decisions for their entire division, I would call it. So yes, ma'am, if we had everything in place to start, the better plan would have been doing this together. Some districts did do it that way. We just chose to do things a little differently to make sure that we could actually keep our hands around the details that continued to change that we did not expect to change.
Can I continue? Sure. Well, one of the concerns that I have heard just over the years, or perhaps questions that I've heard from parents, perhaps they'll hear that one school is doing something, let's say reading plan, and then they'll say, well, our school isn't doing that. That's really, that really sounds great. And so there's concern when they're comparing, and that they're thinking, well, that's really terrific, sure, but we're not going that far. Mm-hmm. And I understand the idea of looking at the data and seeing what the school needs, but I would imagine that the plan would generally be the same. I would think so. don't exactly know how you would make it special for each school, but my concern is that there would be, and that would be across the board for really anything. But that's just the feedback that I have gotten over the years, and I just want to share that with you, and I would prefer that we don't have that type of it's not competition, but that type of comparison, that's the better word.
And that's fair. So when our schools start doing this drafting, you heard Mr. Bounds say their plans will be due the 1st of September. We will be involved with reviewing what they do. And our plan is we're going to be training principals and their designee beginning on the 18th of May, which is next Wednesday. We'll start training them as to what this includes and give them feedback that you all suggested. We also have been told by the State Department that this particular template that we've done this year is in effect for 1 year. So they wanted to get this up and get it started and take feedback. And I can say to each of you, I've been asked to serve on that committee that will be at the state level designing or redesigning what this may look like, so we can use the lessons that we've learned, because there are some districts that created the plan and sent it out and said, this is a plan that you need to use. There are others that let the schools do it, and then they look to see what kind of similarities they could find. So every district seemed to have done things differently. Some districts did not share that with their board. We feel like it's important for you all to see what we're doing, to make sure that you're aware and that you approve of the process, which is why we asked to delay the submission of this document, is to ensure you all had seen it and given us your blessings on it and your support, because we have a little bit of a window of time we can make any revisions should you all request that. So one example would be if you look just at Goal 6, which is the first of the Read to Succeed plan, you see the goal is to have 100% of our schools establishing a literacy leadership team. That's going to vary depending on the level. So if I'm elementary school, you may already have what's considered to be an RTI team, your reading intervention team, where you're looking specifically at students and also the literacy instruction in your school. If you look at the middle level, we have a middle level intervention. So we have schools that are looking specifically at identified students that have been deemed as a struggling reader. How are those students doing? So if a school doesn't already have a team in effect at the middle level, they may have their ELA department together with department heads in addition to their teachers, and then in tandem at the same time, their intervention team for their middle level. And if you think about high schools, it could be multiple teams. It could be department heads. It could be the leadership team that's inclusive of the whole administrative team. So it's really going to be up to the design of the school. But our expectation is all of our schools create some sort of a leadership team specifically for looking at literacy instruction and literacy achievement. But some schools may decide to have 2 or 3 depending on the needs that they have or the vision that that particular school may have. So we're hoping this is enough of an umbrella to get them started, but not enough to put them in a, well, I don't have that, you have that, but we don't. Elementary does, but high school doesn't. To try to make us not be competitive or comparison of what one has versus another does not, but to make sure that the focus is indeed on literacy and the achievement of our students. Does that, okay?
That sounds good.
Okay.
I do, just keep that in mind of the concerns.
Certainly, certainly.
Ms. Hammond. Green light.
My teacher voice, I figured that you could hear. My question was going to be, but I also wanted to comment on how I understand, I guess, especially as a teacher, the populations that you serve. And it could be a need and a goal at one school could be very different, even though, as you're saying, the one umbrella. So I know you're going to keep an eye on Ms. Hutchinson's concern, but I also want to say that it's smart to understand that the State Department is ever-changing with some of the ideas, and the State Board of Education gives us direction, and so I think it's really smart to be a fluid situation. But this was my question. That 100% of District 5 schools will establish a literacy leadership team. I'm very curious how would each team be chosen by the principal of each school, and then it would be, I guess, community members, teachers from the different levels, a department head. I was curious in how you would decide, because I know it'll take a lot of time, and I know teachers already give great amount of time, so do administrators, community members, or volunteers, but still, I'd like to know how it will be put together, sort of the process.
I think the process will vary depending on the school. You know, if I'm a principal, I may decide to include a subcommittee of my SIC who may have some volunteers that would like to come and meet with our teachers during the day and serve on a committee. The intent is not to add additional work nor extend the workday for our teachers or our staff. But currently, we already do have so many literacy teams in effect in School District 5 at varying levels, but the personnel is different. If you look at our elementary schools, we have more reading interventionists at the elementary level. We have one at each middle school or intermediate school, and no identified interventionists at the high school level. So it's going to vary depending on the personnel and the purpose. A school may decide to have multiple teams depending on the need of that school and the personnel to operate within those teams. So to answer your question, the principals are going to be instrumental, which is why we're requiring that they attend this meeting next Wednesday afternoon, so they and their designee can start to formulate who might be on our team and who could really help us. It's always important to include the community the perspective of the community. And I'm proud to say that our principals do include with their SICs and parent leaders, they make sure they share achievement data with them, perceptive data such as surveys with them. So I hope that our community does feel well informed for the school that they serve so they can be informed about the data and the achievement of their students, but also that we're looking to hear feedback from them. And if you look towards goal 11 and 12, you're going to see a lot about the community involvement, inclusive of parent communication to make sure that parents understand this legislation requires retention. So you are all going to see us in the future bringing forward our retention policy because the current students are in first grade. If they're not reading on grade level by third grade, they will be retained when they're in third grade. That is by state law, not District 5 expectations, but that's within the whole umbrella of Read to Succeed. So it's wide encompassing. You heard Dr. Jakes 2 meetings ago share with you the certification impact of Read to Succeed. Mr. Bounds is sharing today about the strategic plan and the Read to Succeed district plan with the school plan to follow, and then has also added another factor of student achievement and then promotion or retention for that particular student.
And Mr. Gant, one more point. I know this isn't really part of this, but it's still our goal for literacy and the state's goal. Do we have in our district any program that helps, if you understand the whole process of people moving on up and then they may get to, say, the middle school years and never have mastered literacy, and that's one of the biggest reasons for failure and for discipline problems. Until we can get this law that's finally been passed and you're not putting, this third grader keeps going on through the system and we lose them in ninth grade or something because they drop out. I think the goal is great, but it's going to be a little while getting there. Do we have any programs to help our students that are, and I really see it greatly as a teacher in middle school, where you have the literacy problem and they're already in the 8th grade or 7th? Do we have any programs like within the school where we have teachers that can work with those students?
Yes, ma'am, we do. Our middle schools, inclusive of intermediate schools, we have what we call literacy lab, where students are intentionally selected and served during the day by a certified teacher and also coupled with an instructional assistant who's highly qualified. We're working with those students on a daily basis to make sure that they and their teachers know what to do to support those students. We purchase specialized materials to support those students. We find that oftentimes many of the students that qualify to be served in programs like that at the middle level are the students that are moving many schools or multiple districts during their educational career. But then we also find some students that maybe just something hasn't worked for them in the elementary level, that they're not quite as prepared for intermediate or middle school experiences. So we've not cured the problem. I will say that to you with honesty, but I can say to you it has much improved and our students are better prepared.
I'm so excited to hear that we have a direct plan for that, because
Yes, ma'am.
that's till we can get this other going and have it for a few years,
Right.
where they're not just promoted.
Right. We have specialized criteria that our administrators are looking for, that teachers are looking for recommendations to put these students that need these additional services. That they're taking their regular ELA classes and then they have these supplemental experiences as well to strengthen their reading skills.
Thank you.
Any other question? Ms. Hutchison?
This might seem like it's really off subject, but for the elementary schools, would you say the reading instruction happens at the beginning of the day?
I would like to say it happens throughout the day.
Well,
that is our
certainly.
intent, of course. Regardless of what we teach, we need to make sure that literacy is incorporated in natural, relevant ways. The schedule is going to depend on a lot of variables, the personnel that's available. For example, related areas, art, music, PE, world language, those kinds of things that our students are scheduled to go to. If your allocation requires that you start your related area schedule at 8:15 or 8:30, then that's going to interfere with reading being the first instructional core block in the day. So that's going to be a factor. There's also going to be a factor of if you're sharing students with other teachers such as special education, speech language, or any other ESOL students that don't speak English as their first language, that too comes into effect of how that impacts your schedule. We really want to make sure that students get their instructional block for language arts. If they have to be pulled for something else, we want to make sure they get that in the elementary schools with a certified teacher. And then if they go out for special education, they go out for another program, that is complementing what we do, not trying to replace in lieu of that core content with the classroom teacher. But I do think you would find, on average, most elementary classrooms would start somehow with literacy. It may be by song, it may be by a news message or their morning message. It may be a read aloud, but in some way, most elementary days kick off with something that's related to literacy, just to get the day going. But I can't say with confidence that it's scheduled that way every day because those other variables come into play.
Well, and that makes sense. I appreciate you bringing that up. And the reason that I mention this, and this comes from a visit to a school, and I asked about the attendance, and they said the attendance is fine, but the problem is tardiness.
Mm-hmm.
And when, as Ms. Hammond said, reading is so crucial, I'm thinking that
Absolutely.
if these students are coming in at 9 o'clock or whatever time, late, and missing some of the critical reading, that is going to be very difficult for them to be successful. So I don't know that's a bigger approach, pulling it out further.
Right.
But that does seem like that is something that we need to look at and address, because children are really missing out on these, on learning.
Absolutely, and Dr. Harris and his staff make sure they work with our schools to work with any student and family that may need improvement plans for attendance, and attendance does include tardiness or either too many early dismissals. All that impacts the instructional day, and if the student isn't there for the full day, they're missing something valuable for their instructional program.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Baumgardner.
Ms. Melton, I was just looking at this, and it looks like we've got it on discussion agenda, and we discussed it last time. Do we need to have it, do we need to move it to first reading? Do you need an approval from us to go forward? It looks like it's very time sensitive.
Paul Harvey used to say the rest of the story, right? If you listen to Paul Harvey, like I used to enjoy listening to him. Initially, Mr. Bounds made the request on behalf of School District 5 that we have approval later in June so we could take it through the full 3 times of bringing it forward to all of you. But now that the deadline has been changed to June 1st, we had to take that and be responsive to that deadline. So we are under a small time crunch. But we don't want to do anything haphazardly. We'd rather you all give us some feedback. So let me defer that to Mr. Bounds, because this is technically his agenda item that he brought forth for discussion.
I think in order to give everybody a fair opportunity to look at any changes, that if we have a vote on it May 23rd, it'll be sufficient. It gives us some time to take it to the State Board of Education, the State Department of Education by June 1st. We appreciate the offer, but I think based on where we are now, if we the initial discussion on Read to Succeed was Dr. Jakes gave a presentation which was actually different than the addition to the strategic plan. So we're in good shape if we get a vote on May 23rd.
Any other comment, question? Thank you. That was very, very good discussion.
Thanks, sir.
Brings us to item number 17, which is under discussion, proposed revisions to board policy IKA grading assessment system, shown in Exhibit D. Dr. Melton?
Thank you, Chairman Gant. Board members, Dr. Hefner, in your Exhibit D, you have probably heard some of the press building across the state of South Carolina that we have adopted a uniform grading scale. It has been adjusted from a 7-point scale to a 10-point scale. There are many schools of thought on that, but from the department standpoint, they have told us as instructional leaders that it is to make sure that students in South Carolina are competitive and that they have as just a fair of advantage as those that are our neighbors. Our neighboring states apparently have already had a 10-point scale in effect, so South Carolina is trying to make sure that students that come into the state to our universities and our colleges don't have an unfair advantage, thus getting more scholarship opportunities and more acceptance than our students may get to have because of their differing grading scales. So lots of reasons went into this, and the legislation was starting to bubble, but instead the department decided to take control of this and make this a department request with their board, with the State Board of Education. So tonight in Exhibit D, I'm bringing to you our draft of the policy. We were hopeful that we could have the policy from the School Board Association so that you could actually see their recommended policy, but in order to make board packet, I was not able to include their policy they'll be sending us in the summer. However, it's nice to have people in high places that will share things with you. I did receive a copy from School Board Association Wednesday afternoon after packet had been put together for all of you, and I can say with confidence that what you're looking at as far as a draft is similar, or actually a match, as to what School Boards has created, except for just the deletion of the uniform grading scale. So the only difference would be they've actually included the 10-point scale there to define it. We made the decision internally for this purpose of conversation, first to make sure the community is aware of the changes, secondly to make sure that you all are in support. Anything that you'd like to add to it, we could certainly do that. But we thought if we just removed whichever point scales it may be from a 7 to a 10, because a year or two from now, it may change again for all we know. So the effort behind this revision was just to simply make sure that we were in compliance with what the state of South Carolina was expecting that we do. If you notice, this draft is for grading in grades for the high school level, 9th through 12th, and any students that are getting Carnegie credit varying courses at the 8th grade or middle school level. So that's who this is for. My plan is next time, since I do have the policy from School Boards Association, that I will bring to you the rule, the administrative rule, which breaks down more into the conversion charts and actually showing how things will be graded and calculated with the 10-point scale rather than the 7-point scale, which we've been accustomed to. Our schools have been waiting for information. It's holding up their printing of lots of things for the coming year. It's holding up teachers of getting their revisions to their course syllabi for the coming year. So we were hoping that we could get this through rather than waiting until the summer, July possibly, whenever we got it from school boards. We wanted to make sure that we gave our teachers in our schools an unfair advantage, to be honest, to make sure we were ready for this, as opposed to waiting until August and trying to get things in motion at our school levels. So Chairman Gann, I'm going to toss it back to you. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any.
Okay, great. Anyone have, Ms. Hammond?
I weighed this in my mind as a teacher, and I think that it's, if it is making us more competitive with neighboring states for our students getting into colleges, it's certainly something we should do. But I do think there are a couple of things I would want you to address to the public. We have students that are very, very conscious of the weighted grade points, and as they're seniors and juniors, and I know anybody that's had kids already graduate, you know how important this was. I think it'd be important, Dr. Melton, that that you can explain to them how, say I'm a 10th grader, or I'm an 11th grader, and it's going to change on me.
Yes, ma'am.
From the 93 to the 100 was the
Right.
A, and now it's going to be the 90 to 100. And it's hard to maybe believe, but there are parents and students that like the rigor and would
Right.
say, well, my kid's been, they're at the top because they can reach this, and I don't think we ought to lower it. So I agree with it. I'm not saying that, but I think, I know you and I had a conversation, and I think Mr. Bounds had a wonderful idea. He talked about, even though it's been on the news, and maybe all of you had seen it in the paper, but a lot of people don't read the paper, and I can just imagine some student not realizing it was happening, and then they're going to go, and they're a 10th grader right now, or 11th grade, and they're going to say, right in the middle of my career that really counts the most, especially your junior year, they're changing it, and I've been making, A's without it being there. Now I'm going to have, little Johnny over here, and he's got an A, and he made a 90. That's not fair. So I want us to do whatever Mr. Bounds was thinking, to educate students first, because they're the most important. We're there for them. But teachers will know that parents understand it.
Right.
So that would be, and that was my conversation to you. And of course, you are so good. You already have answers here for us about it. But I just wanted to share that publicly.
Absolutely.
For you to explain to everybody how we'll take care of those weighted, and it being changed sort of in the middle of their career. I'd
Yes,
say their
ma'am.
student career.
And I agree with you, Ms. Hammond. We've got to make sure that our community understands, because the last thing we want is for someone to get their child's class rank and then them be thoroughly confused. So for everyone to understand, the current grading system is in effect until the conclusion of this academic year. If I'm taking a summer class and I'm a rising senior, then that will be calculated on the 7-point scale. Once the academic year has concluded to start the year of 16-17, that's when all previous grades will be locked is the word that the department is using. They're going to lock it. Mr. Bounds and the accountability department is going to make sure that we see to the conversions through power schools. So this 10-point scale will not take effect until August of 2016, and no recalculations will be done for any grade that's already in our system. Let's imagine we have a student come into our district from out of state. Those grades will be locked. Any classes that are underway, there'll be a conversion for that. So the accountability department and Mr. Bounds will make sure that that student is uniquely calculated to make sure that student gets their fair advantage as well, but not treated differently than students that have been in District 5 for their entire career, where it counts the most for scholarships, class rank, and what they do after their 12th grade experience. So we do agree that there's going to be a lot of communication, and Mr. Bounds had the idea of sending something out to the community to make sure they understand that this is affecting South Carolina, but also District 5, because sometimes people see things in the news and think that's our neighbor or that's someplace else. This is local, but it's not our request, it's our compliance.
And one other, well, to inform the public, it's a choice, if I'm understanding right, let's say your middle schools can decide about using it or not, but I guess as districts, but high schools have to do it by the State Board of Education.
High schools or
Yeah.
Carnegie
Carnegie
credit-bearing classes have
credits.
to do it. So middle, intermediate, and elementary could all be up to the district choice.
And just to be clear, your recommendation would be all of our schools will be on that same grading scale.
From third grade up, yes, ma'am. We actually shared the draft with the principals last Wednesday, and based on interactions that we're hearing from them, I've asked them to share this with their SICs and parent leaders. Now, this time of the year, we may have just missed that last meeting, so I'm not sure having had the opportunity to actually do that simply because of the timing that we shared this with them last Wednesday. But we do hear that there's a consistent request that we have one grading scale, that not have third grade through eighth on a 7-point, and then all of a sudden, high school or Carnegie Barrett classes up be on a 10-point scale, and then we do a letter rating scale of satisfactory or not at the primary level. So their request was that we make things standard from third grade and up, so we don't have confusion within the system.
And my last comment would be, I've really had a lot of conversation with this with teachers and with principals and with even a couple of the State Board of Education members I know well, and I was sort of arguing why would we change it, because I sometimes think rigor is very important, you know, in lowering it, was wondering, are we lowering our standards? But they argued with me that, well, at least the State Board of Education members argued with me that we need to be competitive, and that's the bottom line of why we're doing it. So I think that's good for parents to know that, you know, we're looking more for the success of their kids instead of trying to make it easier to make an A.
Right. The
So-
phrase that I shared with principals last Wednesday was one that department is using, and that's recalibrate your thinking. Our
That's good.
teachers have to recalibrate their thinking. So if an A is an A, now an A is a 90, are we going to recalibrate our thinking to make sure that an A is more rigorous, not going down, lowering
Right.
our standards? So it's not to inflate grades. Instead, it's to make sure that we're adjusting how we grade and our expectations of those grades.
Good, thank you.
Any other question or comment? Dr. Melton, thank you very much. That was very informative. Well, I'll remind everyone that our next meeting is May 23rd at Harbison West Elementary, and I will entertain a motion that we adjourn. Ms. Baumgartner,
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
have a second. Ms. Lovelace seconds. All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Thank you all for coming tonight.